go. We truly appreciate the tremendous support from Northrop Grumman over the many, many years that we've had them as a member and a supporter of AAS. And we especially appreciate Lauren Holt's participation on this year's Goddard Symposium Planning Committee. Thank you very much, Lauren. So here to introduce our keynote speaker is AAS Vice President of Programs and Corporate Director of Civil Space Programs at Northrop Grumman, Marty Frederick. Marty.
It's a great honor to be up in front of this crowd. I've served on the planning committee of the Goddard Symposium for several years back in the day, and I want to say, looking at the program and how what you're being treated to this go around, I think it's done a really great job. So Lauren and all of your folks on the planning committee, congratulations on putting together a really great program. And as VP for programs, I'll give you an A+. So I'll put in a plug for AAS. If you're not members or participating now, or you're just catching one symposium a year, please try and look at all the other opportunities that AAS provides, and Jim and Ron providing such great leadership for this great organization, I think is really important. So enough of the AAS pitch. Northrop Grumman is my other job, and I just want to say I'm really proud to be representing our corporation here. We're proud to be part of the AAS community. We, much like the rest of the space community, we've had a great year, and with results coming back from Webb and Artemis 1 launch and launches up to the space station with our commercial resupply and all of the other, and JPSS-2 launch, et cetera. It's just been a great year for us, but it's been also a great year for the whole community. And I just wanted to congratulate all of us that are being a part of a great time in a great industry, and we'll just have to keep it up. Now, one of the guys that's going to keep it up and keep us moving in the right direction is Jim Free. So Jim has been done everything, seen everything in the space industry at this point, and he retired apparently in 2017 or so, he says, went out into industry and couldn't resist the lure back into the agency. I got to know Jim back in the early 90s back at Goddard, and have been able to watch him go through his career and take on all the responsibilities across the agency on his way around the different aspects of the agency's responsibilities. He went out in industry for a while, but got him back at a really crucial time in 2021, come back and take the reins of an important effort to get us back to the moon and on to Mars. And Jim is uniquely qualified to provide that leadership. So with that in mind, I won't give him a hard time about just being a propulsion guy. I will, in fact, turn it over to him. But first, a video to lead in for him.
Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and learn how to live.
The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. And here we go. Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis.
This view of Earth from a human-rated spacecraft not seen since 1972 during the final Apollo missions.
distant retrograde orbit. We're going to be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface. We're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo.
The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit. Splashdown. Orion back on Earth.
All right, let me introduce Mr. Jim Free, Associate Administrator of the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate. Jim. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marty, and I won't give you a hard time about being an ACS guy either, but that's another discussion. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. Thanks to the AAS for having me, and let me thank Mike Hawes for everything that you taught many of us in this room along the way in every aspect. So thank you for all you did. Being here at the Goddard Symposium is a real honor in general, certainly on the 60th anniversary. And as a propulsion engineer, it's not lost on me that this is named for Dr. Robert Goddard. I had the pleasure of working at Goddard during the early part of my career, and for all he did to foster the development of propulsion, in addition to everything he did for science, invented the first liquid fueled rocket, and how to really use that technology to explore even the moon. And that's what we're setting our sights on today. And if he had not had that ability to construct those first rockets and launch them, we certainly wouldn't be nearly as close as we are from everything you saw in that video of launching NASA's most powerful rocket. And we certainly wouldn't be on the cusp of our exploration of the moon. Space exploration really does benefit all of humanity. It promotes innovation and furthers scientific discovery, which I know this symposium is particularly focused on. It inspires our pursuit of our dreams, that scientific discovery to help us understand how the universe began and how it continues to evolve. It helps us protect our life right here on Earth. And that scientific discovery, I think most importantly, inspires that next generation to study science and technology, engineering and math. And science as we know it has been shaped through research conducted outside of Earth's atmosphere. From investigations on ISS to observations from our great space telescopes, tremendous leaps have been made in science and in inspiration. And likewise, because of the discoveries made by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, we know that our moon is our next great laboratory. More groundbreaking scientific discoveries are just around the corner as we explore the moon more than ever before, starting at the South Pole. We took that first critical step, as you saw in that incredible video, with the launch of Artemis 1. On November 16th, the Space Launch System rocketed into space for the first time, lifting the Orion spacecraft into orbit from Kennedy Space Center on a historic groundbreaking 1.4 million mile journey around the moon and back. That video never gets old, by the way, for me. I won't speak for you. Using the 8.8 million pounds of thrust, the only rocket powerful and safe enough to launch Orion and its future human occupants to the moon in one shot lit up the Florida night sky. I was honored to experience that liftoff from the Launch Control Center at Kennedy, and hopefully some of you experienced it yourselves and understand what that felt like. And for me, no launch is ever taken for granted. And for me, launch is actually kind of an emotional event, maybe even spiritual, but we won't go there today. It engages so many of the senses. You know, I think people just think of seeing it, but you actually feel it. I remember seeing my first, I think the first launch I saw was a Titan. You feel that on your chest, and you can't explain that to people until they actually experience it themselves. After launch, over the next 25.5 days, our team executed a picture-perfect mission, and I think this is a picture-perfect for sure. Orion became the first human-rated spacecraft to enter the distant retrograde orbit, and at its farthest point, In that orbit, Orion surpassed the distance record for a spacecraft designed to carry humans and safely return them, traveling 268,593 miles from Earth on November 28th. We used that distant retrograde orbit to test Orion's systems far from Earth. Engineers validated Orion's systems and pushed the boundary of the spacecraft's performance, from certifying the optical navigation system, which you saw in the video, to understanding how the propulsion system operated. And we stressed the limits of the communication systems as well. We really put Orion through its paces, and honestly, it performed wonderfully. I'm pleased to say that the fully integrated SLS and Orion met every single of its primary flight objectives. We performed end-to-end demonstration of all mission phases with the launch, flight of the spacecraft, including safely landing and recovering the Orion capsule. The mission went so well that we actually added additional objectives midway through. We added an additional 21 objectives real time, in addition to the 124 we planned at launch. An example of an added objective occurred on day 14, where we collected information on Orion's thermal characterization to help engineers understand and explore the range of the thermal system performance, reducing the uncertainty for future Artemis missions. One of the main objectives and the most challenging phase was bringing the spacecraft home. Before splashing down in the Pacific on December 11th, Orion began its return using the skip entry technique to demonstrate the performance of its heat shield at lunar return velocities with temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly half the temperature of the surface of the sun. And that last half hour before it landed, I can assure you, was nail biting. I had the pleasure again of watching the return from a critical place in mission control there. And I love the video, by the way, because you see mission control and it landed and everybody's sitting there, right? And then you see the auditorium, everybody's cheering. It's totally perfect for MCC. I got to hear the call outs from the aircraft we had observing, because we had an interesting LOS, AOS situation come up. So hearing the aircraft say, hey, I have the vehicle, which was great. And then seeing the parachutes was truly unforgettable, and glad I put some deodorant on that day. And then seeing it in the well deck of the USS Portland was also a moment to really take some extraordinary pride in what had been done. And you know, we really did it. A lot of people in this room, a lot of people across the country and around the world flew a successful Artemis I mission. And in doing so, we validated NASA's deep space transportation system, which our crews will rely on for safe human space exploration. We couldn't have asked for a better first mission. In 25 and a half days, we came incredibly far. Everyone in Artemis should be very proud of that work. Since bringing Orion back to Kennedy for post-flight analysis, our team has been poring over the data from that first mission, trying to understand the vehicle and to prepare and optimize for Artemis II. We've removed all the science experiments we had inside Orion. I will say we've done science from the first mission, including Munikin, our Commander Campos, and his friends Helga and Zohar. Commander Munikin Campos, a human stand-in, sat in the spacecraft commander seat and wore a first-generation Orion crew survival system pressure suit, a space suit astronauts will wear during launch, entry, and other dynamic phases of the missions. Commander Campos was named for Arturo Campos, the electrical power subsystem engineer for the Apollo 13 mission, a key contributor to the safe return of that crew, representing the diverse backgrounds that make the space program possible. Commander Campos served multiple purposes. He was equipped with a sensor under the headrest and behind the seat that recorded accelerations and vibrations throughout the mission. And he also had 2 internal radiation sensors. Engineers will compare the Artemis flight data from Commander Campos with previous ground vibration tests that we've done using the same type of mannequin and human subjects to analyze performance before our crewed flight on Artemis II. As I mentioned, there was Helga and Zohar that also accompanied him, and they were in the lower seats on Orion, and they made up the MARI experiment, and for the first time measured the amount of space radiation astronauts may experience inside Orion during missions to the moon. Space radiation is a significant human health risk and greatly influences how we plan for and construct our long-term human spaceflight missions. Understanding the risk and developing protective measures could allow the crew to continue working during continue critical mission activities during potential solar flares. This knowledge will improve our ability to prepare for and limit the effects of radiation exposure as we begin to travel further and longer missions. Reducing this risk is essential for missions to Gateway and future missions to Mars. And I understand the results are truly groundbreaking and actually will be published in a scientific journal in the July timeframe of this year. In addition to removing the science experiments, we've removed the avionics boxes. I know I can look over at my cause during this one from the Artemis 1 Orion capsule to refurbish and reinstall them on Artemis 2, which has actually been completed as well already. We've removed the heat shield from Orion and are conducting further analysis and inspections to understand its performance better. Artemis 1 was a phenomenal first step, but it's really just that, a step. It was a flight test to approve the integrated Artemis 1 vehicle, and our next mission, Artemis 2, will fly astronauts around the moon, traveling farther into the solar system than humanity has ever traveled before. Artemis 3 will mark our humanity's return to the lunar surface. And last year, we identified 13 candidate landing regions near the South Pole, each containing multiple potential landing sites for Artemis 3. Several of the proposed sites within the regions are located among some of the oldest parts of the moon, and together with the permanently shadowed regions, provide the opportunity to learn about the moon's history through previously unstudied lunar materials. Teams across NASA are working together to consider possible landing sites from all angles. However, Artemis is more than just a lunar return. With Artemis, we're returning to the moon to accomplish something more ambitious than anything humanity has ever attempted. We'll learn how to live and work on another planetary body. The impact of Artemis and our lunar exploration efforts will ripple into ways that will be impossible to precisely measure. In short, Artemis will change the world, and science is at the forefront of every one of these missions. Over the past year and a half, under the leadership of our Deputy Administrator, the agency has developed goals and objectives that detail what we'd like to do and achieve at the moon and Mars. We realize that if we are to maintain momentum toward Mars, we need that strategic direction and a common understanding that can be shared among all parties of why we're going to the moon, so we can keep that why as our North Star. These objectives for what we want to achieve at the moon and Mars will shape an architecture that keeps moon to Mars visions consistent and constant. The objectives reflect a matured strategy for the agency and our partners to develop a blueprint for a sustained human presence and exploration throughout the solar system. How we go to the moon and how we go to Mars will inform how we go to future destinations beyond that. Those objectives are set up by distinct and fundamental pillars that form the foundation for an optimal systems engineering process where objectives drive our architecture. Our objectives provide clear direction for new technologies, vehicles, and elements to be developed to perform our scientific endeavors. And the objectives are stable enough that fluctuations in funding, which never happen, geopolitical influences, and other external pressures are independent of the continued progress to achieve them. When we develop these objectives, we aim to cover the practical and the aspirational, giving ourselves political, financial, and technical resilience. To fulfill these objectives, our mission directorate is chartered with developing an architecture that we do in concert with the rest of the agency. We recently completed our first architecture concept review last week. This first one was meant to get our process down, how we do the architecture, and fine-tune our plans through Artemis 5. Through the architecture concept review process, we're taking the goals and objectives and distilling them into characteristics and needs from which we can develop use cases, functions, elements, and requirements. The primary product from this review is our architecture definition document, which you'll all have the chance to read. And it provides a detailed snapshot in time of the architecture. While the document isn't requirements or mission definition document, the architecture gaps identified in the document will help us guide us as we implement the architecture with new programs and establishes partnerships to build the elements that will achieve these functions. In the end, our architecture will support longer surface stays, more lunar science, and create that blueprint for solar system exploration. I did say a blueprint for solar system exploration. However, to be clear, we're going to the moon and need to understand the environment there. Doing that, meaning understanding the moon's environment, is science. Learning about that environment is where we need all of you. We need you to help us learn and know what questions to ask to develop systems to facilitate more science and more learning. While the moon isn't the end game, it's also not just a stepping stone. It's a destination that is a treasure trove of valuable, fascinating science where we can stay long-term. It's where we can develop a new generation of technologies for human exploration. We need the scientific leadership on Artemis, and this community exemplifies that. We need your help, and we need you to get involved. Your input will help us all build better, more robust systems that will enable more scientific research. Your expertise can help us understand the environments we're exploring and the work we'll need to do for human exploration, and that both are of immense value to us. We need knowledge about the moon to help us develop those systems and the concept of operations that will be successful and allow everyone to get what they need from Artemis. That same knowledge, though, will require flexibility from all of us as well. As we understand the environmental conditions, we'll need to evolve our systems each time we fly. We recognize that this task of going to the moon long-term is complex, and that's why NASA was tasked with leading it. We do the hard things because we are capable of that, as we've proven so many times. We're the only ones to put a person on the moon, nobody else. So the world is relying on NASA to go back, but we're not going alone. You're coming with us. We're counting on you too, as I said. We rise together, but we fall together as well. A long-term presence is only possible when we build to learn more about the lunar environment. However, to get to this point, where we are studying the moon in depth and learning how to go to Mars, there needs to be more to our architecture. Artemis 1 was a flight test that helped us validate foundational pieces of our architecture. We need more than just those transportations. We need more than SLS and Orion and the supporting ground systems. We need to consider what other elements are necessary for lunar surface stays. This includes a lunar lander, lunar surface EVA suits, gateway, on-orbit fuel transfer, surface habitation, and expanded mobility capabilities. We're designing an entire architecture around going to the moon for longer to conduct more scientific investigations and increase the cadence of our missions. A great example is how we design the requirements for our surface elements. In the past, we would develop human spaceflight assets to be usable only when humans were there. Under Artemis, we'll go to the moon once a year, likely for only a month with our crews. And while our science return will increase greatly because of having the crews there, we want to maximize the usability of our systems during the other 11 months of the year. We're designing these systems to be remotely operated so they can continue to work just as hard for us when the humans aren't there. As a result, we're accelerating scientific return through the capabilities we're building, from how much we can bring to the moon to even what we did on Artemis 1 to characterize the lunar environment. We captured vital science data about the environment and protective measures for our future crews on Artemis 1 with Moonikin and the Phantom torsos, Helga and Zohar. The Space Launch System deployed 10 science investigations and technology demonstration CubeSats. Each CubeSat had a unique mission with the potential to help fill gaps in our knowledge of the solar system or demonstrate technologies that may benefit the design of future human missions to explore the moon and beyond. Everything that we can learn at the moon will feed forward to Mars. The benefit of going to the moon is we're only days from home. Mars, we're years. Learning to operate these systems from the comfort of a few days return is paramount to building confidence towards Mars trips. This is similar to going on your first camping trip. For your first trip, you're not going deep into the wilderness or a remote area. You'll likely go someplace local when you're an hour away from home, where you can practice setting up your tent, lighting a fire, and if anything goes wrong, you pack up and go home, or just light everything on fire and go home. And if everything goes right, the next trip, you'll have confidence to go farther, maybe to that remote place. And Randy Bresnick gets credit for that analogy. I think it's a great analogy. We've done this before, though, learning to live off the planet. Truthfully, the last time all living humans were on this planet was over 22 years ago. The International Space Station has been continuously occupied since November 2nd of 2000. In the past 22 years, we fostered a strong economy in low Earth orbit. We live in a world where NASA no longer bears the burden of holding up both sides of the supply and demand equation. Our goal is that in the future, we can purchase services as one of many customers. We hope that it will create a competitive environment, thus driving down costs, increasing innovative solutions, and adding to the knowledge that we as humankind gain daily in space. Spacesuits are a prime example of a service we want to purchase. Last year, we awarded a contract to 2 vendors for our spacewalking systems. Both vendors compete for tasks to build these systems for either the International Space Station or our Artemis missions. We awarded the task for Artemis 3 spacewalk suits just this past fall. And just as we've done in LEO as part of our Moon to Mars strategy is proving business cases for various aspects of the campaign to help shape a new frontier. Developing market business cases creates an environment where innovation and partnerships can continue to advance what is possible while garnering support and advocacy for Moon to Mars exploration. However, to create advocacy, to keep Artemis alive, and to maintain the momentum to send humans to Mars, we must continue to focus on why we are going. We can build rockets and rovers, habitats and spacecraft, but the demand for scientific knowledge must drive our engineering. We have so much to learn about our place in the solar system, more than we could ever hope to learn in a generation. As a result, we must keep inspiring young people to enter careers in STEM and encourage them to stay thirsty for new discoveries that will change how everyone on Earth perceives their place in the universe. We hope Artemis 1 did just that, because these young people are what will make Artemis possible. Momentous development effort is ahead of us, I can assure you. I think about that every day. While there are historical parallels, none rival the complexity of simultaneously building lunar orbital and surface infrastructure 250,000 miles from Earth with increasing government, international, and industry partners. We truly have our work cut out for us, but we know what it takes to build that long-term sustainable presence. We are going, and the time is right now. We'll announce the first 4 astronauts flying around the moon on Artemis 2 in the coming weeks. And as you hear their names called and see them walk on that stage, remember that you are part of this global effort to go back to the moon. Artemis 1 is all of ours. NASA might be leading the charge, but it's through scientific discovery that will stay at the moon long term. I really appreciate the opportunity of you having me here today and talking, and we look forward to going to the moon with you for science and for all humanity. So go Artemis.
Excellent. Jim is generously willing to take some questions. So
It's better than going back to headquarters.
Is one of our Maryland students close by?
Uh-oh, this is tough. My son just turned down going to the Naval Academy, and here's a midshipman.
So any questions? Raise your hand. Anyone?
Midshipman Initial. Last week, I had the opportunity to talk to Lieutenant Commander Kayla Barron, so astronaut, Naval Academy graduate. One of the questions that I asked her, and unfortunately she wasn't able to disclose too much about it, maybe you can allude a little more at the unclassified level. One of my biggest concerns for Artemis is timing, and specifically to get to Mars, right? How do you relay time and navigation information when you consider relativistic effects?
Yeah, so we're struggling. I won't say struggling. The communication and PNT around the moon is our requirements for that are growing seemingly exponentially. It's actually one of the biggest things that concern me. And I think it was during the architecture review, we talked about how if we're struggling at the moon, what are we going to do for Mars? So our architecture concept review that I just mentioned was our first one. We're going to start doing them every November. So this November's focus is Mars. And that was when that discussion came up last week, it was added to our agenda for Mars because we haven't considered it yet. At the first order, we've thought about it, and I'll leave, as Kayla said, I won't talk about the rest of it, but for the moon, it's becoming a big driver for us on our systems and how we do it. So my focus right now is getting that set for the moon. with an eye towards Mars. So I said that we try and connect them. So what we're developing for the moon, we have to feed forward to Mars. So we don't have the details, that all of which I could share here, but I will tell you that PNT for the moon is probably our biggest challenge. I've talked about at JSC, they kind of have a simulator they'll put you in where you're at the South Pole, really low solar angles, and you kind of walk away from the lander and you turn around to find your way back. Because I very foolishly, as a propulsion engineer, I'm like, oh, we just put flags so you can follow them back. But when you turn around and the sun is right at you, it's totally disorienting. So that's the first indicator that PNT was a problem for us. The second is we have all these systems in development and trying to get the same requirements across them and how you're achieving them. Is it Wi-Fi? Is it UHF? Is it S-band? Is it X-band? Is it optical? That's the other one. So we're struggling to get that narrowed down and focused at the moon for all of our systems. And then we're going to do our best to feed forward to Mars.
Any other questions?
All right.
Back to headquarters.
I am off the hook. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind,